Thank you, Cameron Clark, everybody. Another round of applause for that gentleman. Okay, Aaron Riley.
How's it going, everybody?
Good.
Thank you for the intro. Thanks for having me. It's great that I'm getting to follow up Cam. Cool story is actually when I started in this industry, I started in 2016, and Cam was actually a client of Cannasafe before that. We have two clients that are that old, and Cam was one of them. And I'm gonna tie that into talking a little bit about the history of compliance testing. When I started in 2016, there was no such thing as compliance testing. It was the only thing anybody cared about was potency, and that was really the only thing that most labs did. We had potency, terpenes, solvents. When I started, we weren't even doing pesticides, and businesses really didn't care about it for the most part. Cam was actually one of the first people. We had a couple people that were interested initially, but Cam was one of the first people that was interested in pesticide testing. So kind of the evolution of it was in 2017, the state came in and said, hey, we're gonna, recreational cannabis is gonna be legal on January 1st, 2018, and they were gonna outline the framework for that. Prior to that, there was really no rules. It was Wild Wild West. They had, all the dispensaries were basically caregivers. It was, the Prop D, 215, everything kind of tied into that. And what the state did is they outlined 3 trenches of testing that were going to occur. January 1, 2018, there was some pesticide testing, microbial. It was pretty rudimentary. A lot of people still, even at that time, weren't getting into it. July 1st of 2018, the state added, a list of 66 pesticides, most of the, more solvents, tougher microbial regs, mycotoxins, and then at the end of last year, early this year, they added like heavy metals testing and mycotoxins, and basically completed full circle. When I first started, we started doing pesticide testing in 2017 before it was required. 70% of products that we tested failed for pesticides. So almost 3 out of 4 things that people were consuming failed for pesticides. And back then, probably 90% of businesses didn't care, or they didn't really have access to stuff that didn't contain pesticides. So it was, that's just kind of what it was. So in terms of what regulations and testing have done for consumer safety, it's moved it miles. I mean, that would be like going to the grocery store and everything had what the FDA would consider toxic levels of pesticides 2 years ago, and now you can go to a licensed dispensary like Wheelhouse here and know that everything on the shelf has been tested, it's pesticide free. The process for testing compliance in California starts with the businesses doing R&D products for their formulations, all those things. So that's not required by the state, but it's common practice and it's good practice for businesses. What they do is they test all of their inputs. So somebody like Cam that makes gummies or vapes, he tests terpenes, flavonoids, anything that he's going to put into his products, he tests per cannabis regulation. So he tests them for heavy metals, he tests them for pesticides, solvents, everything that goes into the final product gets tested, including dosing. And then what happens is the lab is called to do the compliance test, and we send a representative from the lab to a licensed distribution location. We're currently doing 1/3 of all the compliance testing in California. We cover the whole state, all the way from Humboldt to San Diego, every day of the week. So we'll go to a licensed distribution location. We'll pick up that batch product based on how big it is how much sample we take, and we'll pull samples from anything. So basically everything except for flour is in units. So anywhere from like 1 to 7,000 units is pretty much a batch size. So we'll go and we'll pull 15, 20, depends on how big the batch is and how much product we need to test. For flour, we take 0.35% of that batch. At that point, after we sample, we have complete chain of custody of that product. It goes straight back to our laboratory where it begins testing. We check the product in, we make sure that we verify all of the forms, all the paperwork. Basically, the way the state regulates cannabis is there's traceability through the whole line of the product for licensed cannabis. Like every input from every flower that was turned into oil, there's accountability and traceability for all that. So we go through the testing process. Phase 3 is 8 or 9 tests, depending on whether it's a flower sample or it's an infused product. Once that testing is complete, we send the business as well as the state the results for that test. If the test passed, then the distributor can go and sell that product to retail or other distributors. If it fails, the distributor has to quarantine that product. Something that's unique to cannabis that's different in ag or other consumer-facing industries is there's not really any product recalls. We haven't had any yet because the way the regulations are set, product isn't released to retailers and the public until it's been verified as safe. So, it's definitely above and beyond of other industry, but it really makes it a great place to be a cannabis consumer. One of the things that is really important for that, and the reason that we do all these things, that the products cost more, that it's tested, that taxes are paid, is to protect consumer safety. I don't know if everyone saw that Leafly just did a big article. There was like 7 people hospitalized from a vape product in Northern California, and there's a lot of potential contaminants in vape products. Like we see it all the time. Cheap Chinese hardware can leach lead into the vapes. The FDA doesn't even have a safe amount of lead that's consumable. There's cutting agents, propylene glycol, which is a common one. Vegetable glycerin is another one. All these things that are very harmful for your body, and there's not really safe levels. The pesticides, miclobutanol, which is the most common pesticide in California. It's used on beans, grapes, most other industry. It turns into hydrogen cyanide when you combust it. And it was a very popular pesticide for cannabis because it eliminates, a lot of, it basically works as an insecticide and as a fungicide. So a lot of people used it because they couldn't grow without it. But, basically if you're buying black market product, you're potentially consuming a cocktail of things that the government has said, hey, you shouldn't have this in your body. And not only that, you're inhaling them. Traditionally is like if there's a little bit on your food, you can wash it off. Your liver processes these chemicals differently, but if you're inhaling it, it's going straight into your bloodstream through your lungs. As we've seen with the public, that's a very dangerous thing. Speaking on cannabinoid potency and consistency, so there's 2 big variables here. One is on the flower side, even a little bit on the oil side, the full spectrum oil. We're dealing with an agricultural product. So there's not really, it's like, it'd be like picking blueberries and be like, do these blueberries weigh the same? Are there the same amount of calories? And there's blueberries, there's not a chance. It's the same thing with flour. You can get a general idea, and the way the regulations are set is that we're taking a representative sample of the batch. So it's a general idea, but there's certain parts of the plant that could be significantly more potent, like 5 to 10%, swings. Fortunately, for consumers that are treating medical issues or want some consistency, there's products like that Cam makes where you can go and you can get 10 milligrams every time. It's made from a refined version of the plant, distillate, and you can know what kind of dosing you get consistently every time. So that's a good segue for consumers that want to know, not I'm going to smoke this and see how I feel, but want to know exactly how a product's going to make them feel, and the consistency for it too. Like my great grandmother's 99 years old, and she likes to eat edibles, but she actually enjoys it. And it's really funny because she was always, historically she was always very conservative and anti-cannabis. And my dad, she was having a lot of aches and pains and having trouble sleeping. My dad's like, hey, how about try some gummies? And she ended up just loving it. She's like, it reduces my anxiety, all these things. Well, I wouldn't feel comfortable giving her something where it was like a mystery dose, like, hey, just take this and see how you feel. And it's like, no, we're going to start with 2.5 milligrams, and we're going to work up to 5. And being on the lab side, I know which products are consistent, which manufacturers have tested all their products. So I could recommend knowing that she's not going to have a bad experience, because somebody that's 99 does not need to take too much edibles. That would be probably the first and last time they would ever be willing to try cannabis. And as Cam mentioned before, he did win. So we have an award show every year. It's called the Cannies, and what we do is we have science-based tests. So we do the highest potency. In Cam's case, we did the most closest to label claim edible. So that's 10. It was 10 milligrams, and that's 10 with 4 decimal places, 10.000. And I think Cam was 9.93 something. It was within 100th of a milligram, which is, we're talking if it was a drop on the table, you wouldn't even see, how much THC is in that product. So that's a really good testament. That's probably one of the hardest awards to win at the Cannies. But we're doing that to recognize the brands that test with us, and really take pride in manufacturing their product, take pride in their growing, all the different practices that are measurable. It's not like a High Times award where it's subjective and it's like, oh hey, you just won an award because you bought the biggest booth here. It's something that we want our brands to be able to stand behind and say, hey, we actually won a science-based award because of what we're doing and the inputs that we're taking to go that far. Lastly, is the entourage effect real? I would say absolutely. I think that's one of the biggest things, and we're still researching the endocannabinoid system and how it affects people. But the entourage effect, we know that certain cannabinoids or certain things don't work well exclusively. I mean, if you look at the drugs, Marinol is synthetic delta 9 THC, and it has one of the worst reputations as a drug. It makes people literally you could take all the bad things in cannabis, and a lot of people that take Marinol describe feeling like that, anxious, paranoid, all these things, and that's literally a synthetic version of one cannabinoid. And on our end, we look at the entourage effect, and a lot of it's a feedback loop through our clients, through consumers, and some of the things that can attest to that is, one is there's certain strains of cannabis that are 20% THC, an OG Kush, for instance, is one that's historically it's never been a 35%. It's not going to be the highest one on the shelf. Well, when you're a consumer, that's usually the one that'll kick you in the ass the hardest. I mean, it's a strong strain, and it's never really that high in potency. It has a unique terpene blend, and it has a little bit of the other cannabinoids, but it's almost one of those things where it's, at this point, scientifically, it's unexplainable what makes the feelings of that more intense than something that's 30%, other than the fact that you can say, hey, there's the entourage effect. Everything in here is combining to make you feel a certain way. And that's all. I guess we're going to do Q&A at the end, so pass it back for our next speaker.